Hey, everybody. I'm Portia Sabin, president of the Music Business Association. Welcome to Music Biz Live, Onward and Upward. Please welcome Steve Boom, vice president of Amazon Music. Hey, Steve.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, thank you.
It's good to see you here in this virtual world that we live in now.
Yes, it's a bit strange, I'm sure, for everybody on the other end too, but I guess after 7 months, we're starting to get used to it as much as we probably don't want to.
I know, but I feel like in the beginning it was way harder because you kept thinking it was going to end. But now I feel like we're all like, well, who knows when it'll end, but at least I have a routine down now.
Yeah, I wish I had a crystal ball on when this thing would end, or not even end, just get back to a closer state of normal. I don't have that crystal ball. I like you, we've all developed routines, and there are days when I'm thankful for that routine, and there are days when I really can't wait to get out of my routine, to be honest with you.
Totally. One thing that's weird about all of us in the music business that I know is like we always travel so much as a rule. Do you find yourself like sad that you're not traveling, or like kind of stoked, like, ooh, I don't have to do all that crazy traveling?
For the first couple of months, it was awesome not traveling. I've traveled 150,000 plus miles a year for 20 plus years in a row, and it was really great. There are certain things I do miss about it. I miss the human connections that come with it. I miss time to disconnect sometimes on longer flights in particular. And given my job, which I is global in nature, the thing I probably miss the most is the overseas travel. I like being in other cultures. That'll eventually come back. I think on the plus side, I've traveled so much for work that honestly, personal travel had started to become less appealing to me.
Wow.
So I'm hopeful that when this is all over and I establish a different rhythm of travel for business later, that maybe personal travel I'll become more adventurous like I used to be when I was younger in my personal travel. It's gotten kind of boring because I'm like, I just don't feel like getting on 24 hours of planes, that didn't sound like vacation for me when I was already traveling that much, but it starts to sound interesting again now.
Totally. That's sort of the big carrot we're having with my 10-year-old is we have these little fantasy sessions where we talk about where we're going to go when COVID is over.
Yeah.
So he's like, I want to go here, I want to go there. And I'm like, that all sounds awesome.
I want to go to a live concert. I don't know about you guys. That's what I want to do.
I want to go to a taqueria and get a
yeah.
very, very
how about go to a taqueria and then hit a live show right after that? How's that?
Right? Amazing. Unbelievable. Well, anyway, I guess we better get into this interview. So, I wanted to talk to you a little bit because you've been on the board of Music Cares for a few years now, and now you're the chair. And I mean, talk about a really unique situation to be the chair of Music Cares when there's a pandemic.
Yeah.
What's that like?
Well, it wasn't expected. Yes, I've been on the board of Music Cares for I think 3 years and became the chair in the summer of 2019. So about 6 months before this all, maybe 6 or 7 months before this all started. Certainly not anything any of us expected. Certainly when you serve for a charity, you don't expect to be faced with that. But, I couldn't have found a more meaningful time to be involved with Music Cares, quite frankly. And it's been an overwhelming experience. I'm so proud of Music Cares. I'm proud of the entire community. Since the pandemic started, we immediately set into a course of action in play to help, especially before the government could step in. Private organizations are often much more nimble. And so we immediately established a COVID fund. And I'm really proud to say that, since the beginning of this pandemic, we've raised and distributed around $25 million to people in the music community. And just to give you a sense of scale, that's several times bigger than a normal year for Music Cares. And it's really been a great partnership across the industry, whether it was working with other, obviously Music Cares is part of the Recording Academy, but we work with the Country Music Association, we work with Latin Academy, we work with most of the big streaming and tech players, whether it's Amazon or Spotify. TikTok was great. YouTube and many others, the record labels, the music publishers, and then, you know, candidly, a lot of artists really looked out for their own by doing performances and raising money on behalf of Music Cares. And it's been amazing. The money, you know, it's still coming in as people still do things, and it's made a huge difference in the community. And the need is still there, obviously. The need's not going away. I mentioned in the beginning, like, I can't wait to go to a live show. None of us really knows when that's going to happen. That's, en masse again. It will, we just don't know when. And so that until that happens, there's so many people who are, you know, struggling that I think Music Cares plays a really important role there. And it's been quite a year. It's been quite a year.
We interviewed Debbie Carroll early in the
she's a gem.
crisis. Yeah, I think it was May that we interviewed her. Maybe it was April. And she was like, you just have never seen the volume of applications. I mean, they had to close it for a while just to process the applications that came in the door. It was so overwhelming.
Yeah, for those of you in the audience, Debbie Carroll is our VP of Health and Human Services at Music Care. She's based in Nashville, and she's the one who really leads all of the community programs, you know, not the fundraising side, but the actual helping people side. And, you know, it's one of the things I like about Music Care is there's lots of different types of charitable organizations. Some are, you're investing for the future, you know, you're investing for a cure to a disease, and those are wonderful, wonderful charities. And others, like Music Cares, are you're investing for the present. And, you know, we're raising money in order to distribute it as fast as we can. And yeah, Debbie and her team, you know, frankly, weren't equipped to handle the influx of applications. But we have, you know, Music Cares, one of the reasons I think some of the other organizations wanted to work with us was because we do have this infrastructure. We've been through this before on smaller scale, whether it was Katrina or the Las Vegas shootings, and we faced crisis in a short period of time, and we do have an infrastructure to take money in and vet applications and distribute money to those people who need it. But even that infrastructure was definitely put under severe strain by the volume. And we did have to pause, in part because of that, but also in part, frankly, like, as fast as we were raising money, the applications for help were coming in even faster. And so there was a moment where it's like, you know, we got to pause new applications just to make sure we can raise enough funds. And we opened those back up as we raised more money. But, you know, we've never raised that much money in such a short period of time. It's incredible. New experience for me personally too. But, you know, the community really understood the pain and the need out there, and really has pulled together. And, you know, I guess my message to everyone watching is the needs hasn't left. It was this shock in March when this all started hitting, but the need's still there. So, and I know it's hard, you know, we all got a little bit of fatigue, donor fatigue and all of that, but whatever you can do to help is greatly appreciated.
We spoke yesterday, my interview yesterday was with Tuwalami Austin, who's the charitable giving person at Sony, and the new person there. And I mean, I'm so impressed with, you know, the level of philanthropy in our industry. You know, I feel like there are so many people willing to help and really trying to find good ways to help each other. I mean, I feel like our industry is a crazy one because, you know, for many years, I feel like there were sort of factions, separations, sort of like, I'm going to hang on to my slice of the pie, and I don't care if you get a slice at all. And now I feel like we've really been thrown by circumstance into this situation where we realize that we're all in it together, and people have just been so loving, and the outpouring of charity has been so touching.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more about that, and it has been touching. And, you know, there aren't that many industries where there are so many people who effectively are self-employed and, you know, don't have the traditional safety net. And that's why I felt like why Music Cares plays such an important role in the music community. It's to come in times of need and to help those who are not able, for whatever reason, don't have that safety net. You know, It could be the struggling singer-songwriter. It could be someone in the crew. It could be a mixing engineer. It's across the board, you know. And but then, like I said, yeah, people have come together, and I hope I'm hopeful and optimistic that ethos will continue as we emerge from this at some point in time in the future and get back to a new normal. Like, you know, it's not going to be the old normal. Hopefully it'll be a better normal once we're out of it.
Yeah. So you guys at Amazon have been doing a lot of pivoting as well in the face of this pandemic. You know, do you want to talk a little bit about the things that you guys have been doing to help people connect? Because that's one of the silver linings of this pandemic, is that, you know, all these online resources and online platforms have actually proven to be a very powerful tool for connection, for keeping people you know, in contact with each other, which has been so important for people's mental health.
Yep, couldn't agree more. Yeah, look, when you're in a crisis, you have to react to the crisis, and you find things that people need, and you see opportunities maybe to accelerate things that were likely to happen anyway. But, you know, we've seen a lot of things happening at Amazon. I think the first thing that we saw when everybody was in lockdown orders, you know, there were a lot of articles in the press about how music consumption was down, while video and video gaming were like skyrocketing because everyone was at home. And obviously a lot of music consumption happens while people are commuting, right? And so no one was commuting anymore. That was one positive. Not the music, the decline in music consumption, but the lack of commuting was awesome. We're a little different than most music services, because instead of being almost all consumption on smartphones, we have a pretty good balance between smartphones, which is kind of the on-the-go listening, and the home listening through Echo smart speakers. And so while we saw the similar dip as the industry saw in smartphone consumptions, we saw more than an increase in home listening that more than offset that decrease. So while the rest of the consumption across the board was shrinking, actually within Amazon Music, it was growing. And that made us feel good, because it's like, these are people at home, they're using music as a way. They may have been connecting with their family members, or just frankly connecting to artists through the recorded music in a way that provided solace. And in fact, we saw the types of music that people were listening to, you know, was much more at the beginning. It went back to normal a couple months later, but in the beginning, we saw people reverting to the type of music that was comforting to them, you know, whether it was specifically comforting music or it was just music from their youth that brought back different memories or whatever.
Catalog, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But then really the biggest thing, obviously, that I'm sure everyone on this, who's watching this, knows about, is that, you know, we saw an absolute explosion of live streaming. And I'm sure most people know Amazon owns a company called Twitch, which is one of the biggest live streaming platforms out there. And immediately we saw artists of all levels, you know, live, from singer-songwriter 5 fans to the biggest superstars in the world, live streaming and using that as a way to connect in real time with their fans, and for the fans inside of those live streams, even to connect with one another through interactive means like chat, etc. And we saw an opportunity to accelerate something that we had long thought about, which is that we expect music streaming services to evolve. We expect them to evolve beyond just being, the way I call it internally here at Amazon, is beyond just being a record store that has a play button inside of it instead of a buy button. And, you know, we really see an opportunity to help, for a music streaming service, not only to help listeners find what music they should play, but actually how those listeners can find new artists to become fans of, and how those artists can find new fans, and those fans can connect with each other. And we think about live music, you know, I don't know of any more intimate form of music between an artist and a fan. You know, every time I go to a live show, I walk out of that concert with a completely different relationship with the artist and that artist's music. And when I hear that artist's music in recorded form, get very different emotions and different associations and have a deeper connection to that music. And so we've partnered with Twitch to enable live streaming inside of the Amazon Music streaming service, with the vision of really connecting and creating this closed loop between live performance and recorded music like no one's ever been able to do before. We know what you like to listen to. So if an artist is going to stream live, we can notify you that an artist that you like, that you follow, or maybe an artist that you don't know, but that people who have similar listening behaviors and like as you are interested in, and a way for you to discover a new artist, but also then to develop that live connection with the artist. And then ultimately the recorded catalog is right there, and really create this closed loop, which I think is one of the most exciting things that we've seen happen in music streaming in a long time. Because I think music streaming is, from a consumer's perspective, it's just amazing, like to have access to all that music for $10 a month. But you should expect to see this evolution to be a much richer, more immersive experience, which ultimately is great. It's great for artists. It's great for the recorded catalogs. It's great for the listeners. And that ultimately means it's good for streaming services and whoever benefits from streaming services.
And, podcasts are sort of another piece of that puzzle. I've certainly been talking a lot. We did a podcasting seminar last week. And, the ideal is that podcasts, if they're about music or if they're by an artist, will help listeners connect to that artist's recorded music as well.
Yeah. So that's the other kind of big trend, right? That's happening in music streaming services. The first being that this evolution of a music streaming service to be more than just, in terms of music, more than just a record store. At the same time, I think you're seeing an evolution of music streaming service to be more than just music, that they're more about a broader set of audio experiences. And we recently added podcasting to Amazon Music. I mean, it was frankly quite a 1-2 punch. We launched the live streaming at the end of August, and I think 2.5 weeks later, we launched podcasting. Now, obviously, those had been under development for a little while. You don't just pull those two things together in a couple of weeks. They just happened to launch around the same time. And, we're seeing what we've done with podcasting is we're bringing in all the podcasts that people hope and expect to find, but we're also, because we're a music service, our first foray into having, original podcasts or exclusive podcasts within Amazon Music are very focused on music. And we're working specifically, to your point, with artists to give them a new voice that they can connect with their existing and future audiences. The first one that went live is with Becky G, and called En La Sala. And she had her first episode a couple weeks ago. It was live streamed and also captured in on demand. Had, if you think about it, she had like 20 to 25,000 concurrent listeners. And if you put that into context, it's like, that was an arena, actually a little bit bigger than a traditional arena. So pretty amazing, first podcast. And her second episode is today. And interestingly enough, she's interviewing Kamala Harris. So it couldn't be more timely given the vice presidential debate tonight. But we're also working with DJ Khaled, and his podcast is going to launch very soon, working with Will Smith. And so, to introduce podcasting to our customers, we wanted to start with originals that are focused on music and entertainment. And, like we've done with music, I think one of the things that Amazon's done really well is we've made the pie bigger, so to speak. We've brought different demographics and expanded the listening pie for music streaming. And, we're quite confident that we are already and will be continuing to do the same in podcasting. I mean, the first 2 weeks of podcasting have far exceeded our expectations in terms of number of customers using it, how frequently they're using it, how long they're listening for. So we're really, really optimistic. And, in a best case scenario, which I think we're on track for, this creates a real virtuous circle, both in terms of just making a music streaming service stickier, which is a good thing for all involved, because the longer customers subscribe and stay subscribed, that means they're going to listen to more music, and there's more revenue to divide between all the copyright holders. But also, like we talked about, to open up a new place for artists to have a voice, not just with recorded music, and not just with live music, but actually their spoken word. And interesting, I should point out, going back to the live streaming for a second, one of the cooler things, it doesn't have to be just about live music. We've done other things like live interviews. Actually, one of the funner things that I saw happen was with 5 Seconds of Summer. This was relatively early in the pandemic. The 4 guys from the band were there, and they were kind of in a Zoom configuration with 4 screen, the 4 blocker Brady Bunch like thing. And they were all talking. They didn't play any music. They were just talking about their music and life more broadly, and having fun with each other. And if you just looked at the chat window, I mean, the place exploded, and people couldn't get enough of it. And again, it's not a band I've listened to a lot of prior to that. I know some of their songs for sure, but I have a totally different appreciation for them as artists and as humans. And when I hear their songs after that, it's a different type of relationship that I have. And we think live streaming and podcasting, but so live and on demand, can be used, whether it's for music or whether it's for spoken word or doing a Q&A session like we're doing here, Q&A session with your fans. There's so many. I think the artists are the creative people, and they will come up with the best ways to use these services.
Yeah, absolutely. I started a podcast about 6 years ago myself, and I felt at the time I was a little bit late into the game, which is hilarious now because
no, you're totally you're on the early bleeding edge still.
Like an oldster. But
yeah.
Even at the time, I remember thinking, man, if Dave Grohl would just start a podcast and he could just read a book and people would just love it.
Sure, absolutely. Why wouldn't you?
Because musicians are so, they're endlessly fascinating to their audiences. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I can tell you I would subscribe to that podcast and then listen to it.
Fascinating. So I have heard you in other interviews talk about, we've got Amazon Music on our phone, we've got the Echo device in our home, and what's next is the car.
Yeah.
So is that something that you guys are still, obviously pandemics put a little dent in driving.
Yeah, it has, but I don't think that takes away from the long-term future. Actually the pandemic in fact highlighted the importance, if anything, what the data I mentioned earlier just highlighted the importance of the car to music and to audio consumption more broadly. It is a place where it's our moving living room, so to speak. And we all spend a lot of time not every country in the world, but definitely the US and many other countries. We are an automobile-based society. That's not going to change anytime soon. Whether we're driving them or they're automatically driven, that's a whole nother topic, but we're still going to be in cars. It is a big area of the future. It's an area that takes a little while to develop. When Echo first came out in late 2014 as a beta product, a couple of years later, there were tens of millions of these things in people's homes. It takes longer with cars. Obviously people don't buy cars every year. The technology in there takes longer to replace. So it's a long-term thing, but yeah, absolutely. We think the car is going to be a big driver of streaming subscriptions. We've seen mobile phone was kind of phase 1 of growth, smart speaker phase 2 as a driver of growth, which we've gotten the industry back to kind of pre-Napster levels or getting there pretty close. And we see the car is kind of phase 3 to get there.
Definitely. I'm always, I feel like I did a podcast episode on smart speakers, the Echo device, and the thing that came out of it was so much interaction with children. I thought that part was so fascinating. And I feel like that's, the pandemic probably, when you give the statistic of, after the first dip, then we saw, listenership go way back up. And I thought 80% of that is probably kids' music.
Well, it wasn't, but there was a lot of it. I'm not going to lie, but that wasn't 80, but kids were already at home, I guess.
I guess so.
But kids like to repeat things. I mean, I can still remember a few years ago, we were at my mother-in-law's house and my 3-year-old nephew was there. And, it was Let It Go from the Frozen soundtrack that over and over again. Yeah, I see the chat window, Baby Shark. That's the new one. And I texted his father, my brother-in-law, from we went skiing immediately after this was go to the Christmas break. And as I'm skiing down the mountain, I couldn't stop hearing Let It Go because I had heard nothing but that for 2 weeks at Christmas. And I had to text him and say, dude, this is killing me. But he, of course, he was empowered to ask for it.
Yeah.
Just by talking to Alexa. He couldn't say much else besides Alexa, play Let It Go. But, kids' music is really important. But it's still just a really small portion of what people are listening to. I think Amazon certainly has a very important role in children's music overall, but when you think about the total consumption, it's still pretty small as a percentage of total listening.
I read an interview with you from earlier in the pandemic where you were talking about, it's sort of weird that across the board, sort of everything you guys have been putting out there has been increasing, even stuff that in the past hadn't done that well, like high quality audio.
Yeah.
But that's on the increase as well.
Yeah, we've been very focused. I think hopefully people realize about a year ago, we launched Amazon Music HD. And this is, we believe deeply within Amazon Music and within Amazon more broadly about the importance of sound quality, audio quality. And we launched the HD service a week before the company announced a new Echo speaker called the Echo Studio, which is a high-res speaker, but at a consumer price point. And it's amazing if you've never heard it. And I'm really proud of the team for focusing on this. We've seen really great customer adoption. We no doubt in my mind, we're the largest high fidelity music service out there pretty easily, I would say. And that's just 1 year into it. But we just last week announced a really cool partnership with Universal Music and with Warner Music Group. It was internally, we actually called this Project Vault. And it's this project that's both backwards looking and forwards looking. But we had this idea when we look through the catalog of tracks in our catalog, everything in the HD service is in CD quality or better. So if it's at CD quality, we call it HD. And then if it's in better than CD quality, we call it Ultra HD. And we noticed that there was actually a lot of iconic music that was in CD quality. And we kind of asked ourselves, well, we kind of wonder if the source files, if the source tapes for those are still around, I bet we could get a higher quality recording of those. So we approached first Universal Music, and they were just amazing, immediately loved the idea. The idea was, hey, could we work together? Let's go back into the vaults. This is the backward looking part of the partnership. And could we remaster these at a higher quality, at the highest possible quality? And then we approached Warner and same idea. And they've both been really receptive to this. They think it's amazing, and the idea is for these recordings really to preserve the artistic legacy forever, not just it's obviously it's about giving listeners the best quality recording, but it's more than that. It goes deeper than that. It's about making sure that, a lot of these source tapes, they're magnetically recorded. Eventually magnetic media deteriorates. And part of this partnership is to take them, it's not just to increase quality, but to make them at the highest quality levels. The forward-looking part of the partnership, though, is both around ensuring that future recordings are recorded at this level, but it's also about another format, what we call 3D audio, which is either a Dolby Atmos format or a Sony 360 RA format. And these are immersive audio formats that were made consumer friendly with the launch of the Echo Studio that I mentioned a minute ago. The Echo Studio speaker was about $200 for this unbelievable speaker. It's the first consumer grade speaker where you could really hear this immersive sound. Normally, it'd be great if you were in the movie theater or if you were in a recording studio, but no one had ever made it where non-audiophiles could afford it. And this was the first speaker to do that. And so part of this partnership is also taking iconic music from the past as well as music going forward and putting them in, remixing them, getting the artists to approve those mixes, and to have those available in this forward-looking new audio format, which we think is super exciting. So very exciting partnership. And like I said, the labels have been tremendous partners on that.
That's great. I feel like, 20 years ago, the only person who cared about high quality audio was like my 55-year-old cousin who had a special chair in the middle of his room and his speakers were like at just the right height to get the maximum,
Yeah.
effect. But I feel like everything in this industry is cyclical and dependent on tech. And so as change, I feel like we're exposing whole new generations of people. I mean, my son with his, video games that are incredibly immersive and his headphones, and it's like he wants things to sound a certain way. I mean, it changes all the time. So I'm not actually surprised to hear that that's doing well.
Yeah, no, I think we shouldn't shortchange consumers and assume what they, that they don't care. The truth is that, digital music has been a long tension between convenience and quality, and convenience up until really last year, convenience has been at the front of everybody's mind. And we've made music, and I don't know how you could make it more convenient than being able to say, Alexa, play X song, whatever it is. That's about as convenient as it gets, right? So I think naturally turning to making sure quality isn't forgotten is a great idea. And our focus, to be super clear with Amazon Music HD, it is not, we want all the audiophiles to come into our service, and we're working hard to make sure that they have some unique needs that we can service those needs. We've made added a number of new features since launch to address specifically those needs. But our focus is on taking this mainstream. We think audio quality matters for everybody. It's not just for audiophiles. And you'd be interested, people have assumed, oh, well, the number one is going to be older people, and so it's going to be classical music and classic rock, which are the number one genres. You know what? The top two genres in Amazon Music HD are pop and hip hop. And hip hop performed better in our HD service, which is obviously a youth-focused genre. It performs better in Amazon Music HD than in regular Amazon Music in terms of share of total streams in the service. So I think you just need to throw away whatever preconceptions you have, market it the right way, price it the right way, and let consumers decide for themselves. And I think people want, of course, why wouldn't you want to hear the music the way the artist recorded it and the way the artist wants you to hear it? Like if these are artists you care about, you should care about the music, hearing the music they want you, the way they want you to hear it. And I think most people just didn't realize that was possible until now. And they're starting to realize it's possible. And now that they realize it, they're subscribing. And, it turns out they're willing to pay a few extra dollars for that. And that's great, because that means, artists are being compensated at a higher rate for the same listening, basically.
Absolutely. No, and I mean, I've seen that. I was in the label side for 13 years. And, if you sell a remastered, remixed version of an album, people who love it are going to buy that album because they want to hear what the artist wants what the new technology affords you in the way of, a different listening experience.
Absolutely. And, we've been super excited about the Dolby Atmos and Sony 360 RA. Artists, almost every artist we've shown it to is blown away. And we hear stuff like, wow, this is how I'm hearing it in the studio. So we thought like, oh, good naming job by Amazon to call their speaker the Echo Studio. It was, if that's how artists really feel. Obviously with the pandemic, unfortunately, it's been a bit slower. We've seen a lot of amazing music coming out that's in Dolby Atmos or Sony 360 RA. I think we're going to see even more, and we're starting to see the velocity really pick up. In the beginning of the pandemic, it was harder for people to get into the recording studios and to remix everything. It was harder to get the music over to artists for them to approve those mixes. But everyone's figuring out the logistics and the supply chain and all that stuff, and realizing, like we started this conversation, that I think we're in this world for a minute longer. So, we've all had to adapt, and we're seeing great music coming out, and we're seeing it recorded at the highest quality as well as in 3D audio, which is pretty amazing.
That is really amazing. So you guys, I mean, you have Prime Music, Prime service, you have the unlimited tier, and then you started an ad-supported tier last year.
We did, yeah.
And that is also doing well.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't know this, I don't want this to come across wrong, but things are firing pretty well on all cylinders right now. We realized that the first push into ad-supported music, we realized that when people buy an Echo, when it first launched the Echo, almost everybody who bought the Echo was a Prime member. And so, when they asked Alexa for something, because they're a Prime member, they had access to Prime Music, she could give them music. And then, our objective has always been, and then great, now if you really want all the music, let's get you into Amazon Music Unlimited. As the Echo became more and more mainstream, despite Prime continuing to grow at a really great rate, more and more non-Prime members started to buy the Echo, and they weren't necessarily getting music out of the box. And it's a speaker, so naturally with a speaker, one of the first things you want to do is to listen to music. And so what we found has been, we're able to get people engaged in the ad-supported tier and then upsell them into the premium tier at a higher rate than we were doing without the ad-supported tier. So it's working out great. We've rolled it out on all the countries. That we just finished launching the ad-supported tier in Brazil a couple of weeks ago, and we've now rolled it out everywhere where Amazon Music has a localized version, and it's doing great, and it's performing ahead of expectations. We've also made it available on visual devices like smartphones or the web browser or whatever, and it's doing great. Yeah, it's been, so we the way we look at our service is very simple. We have an introductory tier, and if you're a Prime member, it's Prime Music. If you're not a Prime member, it's the ad-supported tier, and then we want to upsell you into Amazon Music HD, Amazon Music Unlimited, and then ultimately our goal is to get you up to Amazon Music HD if that's the right thing for you. But more people obviously at Amazon Music Unlimited, and that's where you get everything, right? You have all the world's music at your fingertips and at the tip of your tongue with Alexa, which is amazing.
Yeah, it's definitely an amazing time to be alive. I mean, the pandemic has truly, had a number of silver linings that I feel like none of us expected at the very beginning, and sort of the engagement of fans with music has been a real big one.
Yeah.
People have spent a lot more time listening. I mean, once everybody got over the fact that the children are now home and attached to your head for good.
Yeah.
Everybody created some new routines and found a way to listen to their music and their podcasts. So
I'm guessing sales of headphones went up. I'm just I don't have any data on that, but I'm just guessing, right? I'm guessing that they went up.
Yeah.
So there were certain businesses that were good to be in. I heard fitness equipment was way up as well. People can't go to the gym, so there's certain things that people have responded.
Yeah. Peloton, boom.
Peloton, yep. We became Pelotoners, if that's the right word in this. And yes, in the chat window, vinyl LPs are way up. It's a bright spot of growth in the music industry, no doubt. And we obviously see that at Amazon really being the largest seller of physical music. We see the growth in vinyl, and it's exciting. As someone who grew up when vinyl was the way that you listened to music, it wasn't because you were cool, it was just that's how you bought music. I still miss those days of having the big album art and liner notes, and with CDs. That was the one thing when we moved to CDs you really lost. Mm-hmm. It was kind of, you were losing, I felt you were losing a bit of a connection to the artist, and those digital booklets for me were never awesome. Some people really liked them, I suppose, but and then streaming, we didn't even have that. But now, going to circle this all the way back to the earlier conversation, digital allows you to create different types of connections to the artist, and frankly more meaningful and more ones that are live and human and intimate. And that's one of the reasons we're so excited about our strategy and the things we're doing with live streaming.
Awesome. Well, Steve, thank you so much for your time today. It was great to talk to you. We appreciate it.
It was an absolute pleasure. I've gotten used to these kind of talking to someone on Zoom and I'm tired of looking at myself after 7 months of the little window. I got to say that, but no, it's a real pleasure. Sorry this wasn't in Nashville like it was supposed to be. I love Nashville, would love to have been there, but hopefully next year.
Definitely.
All right.
Great. Take care. Thanks so
Thank
much.
you.